The rope burns on their wrists told Jake Morrison everything he needed to know about how long the 5 Apache women had been hanging from that old cottonwood tree. Their feet barely touched the ground, and their voices had grown hoarser from calling for help that hadn't come until now. What Jake didn't know was that saving them would cost him more than just the bullets in his gun. It would cost him everything he thought he knew about justice, family, and the price of keeping promises in the unforgiving desert. "Please," the oldest one whispered as Jake approached with his knife drawn. "Save us, B." But as Jake cut the first rope, he had no idea that those 2 words would change his life forever. If you're joining us on this desert adventure from anywhere around the world, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. We love connecting with fellow Western story enthusiasts across the globe. I had been tracking the Garrison gang for 3 weeks when I heard the voices calling through the desert wind. At first I thought it was just the sound that rocks and sand make when the temperature changes. But as I guided my horse closer to the grove of cottonwood trees near the dry creek bed, the voices became clearer. "Help us," one called out in English, though accented with Apache inflection. "Please, someone help us." What I found made my blood run cold. 5 Apache women, all young and beautiful, hanging by their wrists from the largest tree in the grove. Their feet could barely touch the ground, and their traditional dresses were torn and dusty from struggling against their bonds. The oldest, who couldn't have been more than 25, looked at me with dark eyes that held both desperation and surprising strength. "You came," she said simply. "Who did this to you?" I asked, pulling my knife from my belt and approaching the nearest rope. "Bad men," another one replied. "They said we had something they wanted. When we refused to tell them where it was, they left us here to die." I cut the first rope, catching the youngest girl as she collapsed. She was lighter than I'd expected, but her grip was strong as she steadied herself against me. "Water," she whispered. I helped her to my horse and gave her my canteen while I moved to cut down the others. Each one thanked me in Apache, then in English, their voices gaining strength as circulation returned to their arms. The oldest woman, who seemed to be their leader, waited until all 5 were free before speaking again. "My name is Ayana," she said, rubbing her wrists where the rope had cut into her skin. "These are my sisters, Cassinel, Naeli, and Sidley." "Jake Morrison," I replied, studying their faces. Despite their ordeal, they were remarkably composed. "How long were you hanging there?" "Since dawn," Cassina replied. "The men said they would return when the sun set if we changed our minds about cooperating." I looked at the position of the sun. We had maybe 2 hours before the gang returned if they kept their word. "I can get you to safety," I said. "There's a mission about 10 miles south where the sisters will take care of you." Ayana shook her head. "No, we cannot go to safety while these men are still hunting us. They will never stop." "Then what do you want to do?" She looked at each of her sisters in turn, and I saw a silent communication pass between them. When she turned back to me, there was steel in her voice. "We want you to help us hunt them down." I stared at her. "You want to go after the men who did this to you?" "Yes," it said, the fire of revenge burning in her dark eyes. "They killed our family. They burned our village. They took everything from us except our lives. And now," Naeli added quietly, "they want to take those, too." I had come to this part of Arizona territory to bring the Garrison gang to justice for robbery and murder. But looking at these 5 women, seeing the determination in their faces despite what they'd endured, I realized that my mission had just become far more complicated. "I'm hunting dangerous men," I warned them. "Men who won't hesitate to kill you if they get another chance." Ayana stepped closer to me, and I was struck by her height and the grace with which she moved despite her ordeal. "Mr. Morrison," she said, "we are not helpless victims. We are Apache women. We know how to fight, how to track, how to survive in this desert. What we need is someone with the authority to make their deaths legal." I understood. As a deputy U.S. Marshal, I could make arrests. I could ensure that whatever happened to the gang would be seen as legitimate law enforcement rather than vigilante justice. "There's something else," Sidley said quietly. "Something you need to know about why they wanted us alive." "What's that?" Ayana exchanged glances with her sisters again. We know where something is hidden. Something valuable enough that men will kill entire families to find it. The sun was getting lower, and I knew we needed to move soon if we were going to avoid another confrontation at the tree. All right, I said, making a decision that I knew would change everything. But if we're doing this together, we do it my way, legal, and by the book. Agreed, Ayana said immediately. As we mounted our horses, the sisters riding double since the gang had taken their mounts, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was much more to this story than a simple robbery gone wrong. Mr. Morrison, Ayana called as we rode away from the grove. There is one more thing you should know about the price of helping us. What's that? As she was quiet for so long that I thought she might not answer. Finally, she spoke. Once you know what we know, you can never go back to your old life. The knowledge we carry will make you a target for as long as you live. I looked at her riding behind me, at the strength and beauty that hadn't been broken by torture and abandonment, and realized that maybe I didn't want to go back to my old life anyway. We rode hard toward the Badlands, following tracks that were easy enough to read in the soft sand near the creek bed. The Garrison gang wasn't trying to hide their trail, which meant they were either supremely confident or supremely stupid. In my experience, both could be equally dangerous. They're heading for Devil's Canyon, Kachina observed, studying the horizon ahead of us. There are caves there where they can make a stand. You know this country well, I said. Better than they do, Ayana replied. Our people have lived here for generations. Every rock, every hidden spring, every safe path through the mountains, we know them all. As the sun began to set, painting the desert in shades of red and gold, Itil suddenly raised her hand for us to stop. Listen, she whispered. In the distance, I could hear the sound of horses and men's voices. The gang was making camp somewhere ahead of us, probably feeling secure enough to build a fire and cook a meal. How many men are we talking about? I asked. 6, when they took us, Naali replied. But there may be more now. They sent riders in different directions before they left us at the tree. 6 men, possibly more, against 1 marshal and 5 women who had been tortured and left to die. The odds weren't good, but I'd faced worse. We need to know their exact position before we make any move, I said. And we need to know what we're really dealing with. Sidley dismounted and pressed her ear to the ground in the old Apache way. After a moment, she looked up. 8 horses, she reported, maybe 2 miles ahead in the canyon mouth. They're not moving. Ayana, I said, it's time you told me the truth about what they're after. If I'm going to risk all our lives, I need to know what we're fighting for. She was quiet for a long moment, looking at each of her sisters before turning back to me. Our father was a chief, she began. But he was also something else. Something that made him valuable to white men and dangerous to his enemies. What kind of something? He knew the location of the hidden places, Cassina said quietly. The sacred places where our ancestors left things. I was getting tired of riddles. What kind of things? Gold, Idil said bluntly. More gold than you've ever seen. Enough to buy an army. My heart sank. Gold made men crazy. And crazy men did things that kept marshals like me busy. Where is it? That's what they want to know, Ayana said. That's what they tortured our family to learn. That's why they left us alive. They think we know the location. Do you? Another long silence. Finally, Naali spoke up. Yes, she said simply. We know. The implications hit me like a physical blow. If these women really knew the location of a major gold strike, then the Garrison gang wasn't just a group of petty criminals. They were the advanced scouts for something much bigger and much more dangerous. Who else knows that you know? I asked. That's the problem, Ayana said. We're not sure. Word travels fast in Apache country, and there are people on both sides who would kill to get their hands on that information. As if summoned by her words, the sound of additional horses reached us from behind. Someone else was following our trail, and they were coming fast. Friends of yours? I asked. Cassina was already checking the loads in the rifle she'd taken from my saddle. No, she said grimly. Those are white men's horses, and they're in a hurry. I counted the dust clouds on our back trail. At least 4 riders, maybe more. We are caught between 2 groups. I realized the gang ahead of us and whoever's behind us. Welcome to our world, Marshal Morrison, Ayanna said with bitter humor. This is what it's like to be hunted by everyone you meet. The sun was almost down now, and in the growing darkness, I had to make a choice that could get us all killed. We go forward, I decided. Better to face known enemies than unknown ones. But as we spurred our horses toward Devil's Canyon, Ayanna called out one more warning. Marshal, there's something else you need to know about the gold. What now? Her voice was barely audible above the sound of hooves and wind. It's cursed. Every white man who's ever tried to take it has died violently. Our father believed that's why the ancestors hid it in the first place. Great. Gold, gangs, curses, and now we were riding into a canyon with enemies ahead and behind. Just another day in the life of a territorial marshal. Me, Devil's Canyon earned its name honestly. The walls rose straight up from the desert floor like the ribs of some massive skeleton, and the narrow entrance was barely wide enough for 2 horses to ride abreast. Worse, there was no way out except the way we came in, which meant that if we were wrong about the gang's position, we'd be trapped with nowhere to run. They're just ahead, Sid Ali whispered, pointing to a thin line of smoke rising from deeper in the canyon. Maybe a quarter mile. I dismounted and checked my weapons one more time. 6 shots in my Colt, 15 rounds for the Winchester, and a backup Derringer in my boot. Not much against 8 men, but it would have to do. What's the plan? Ayanna asked, sliding down from her horse with the fluid grace that all the sisters seemed to share. You 5 stay here with the horses, I said. I'll go in alone, and no. The word came from all 5 women simultaneously, spoken with such force that my horse actually shied away. This is not your fight alone, Cassina said firmly. These men killed our family. Apache law demands that we be the ones to balance the scales. Apache law doesn't carry weight in a federal courtroom, I pointed out. We're not in a courtroom, Elil replied, her dark eyes flashing with anger. We're in Apache territory, hunting Apache killers with Apache weapons. I looked at the rifle in her hands and realized it wasn't one of mine. None of the weapons the sisters were carrying had come from my saddle. Where did you get those guns? Nayeli smiled for the first time since I'd cut her down from the tree. You think we hung there helplessly for hours without planning our revenge? We hid weapons all over this desert, Marshal. This is our land. Before I could respond, the sound of horses echoing